أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى.
ما شاء الله.
ما ودعك ربك وما قلى. وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى.
سبحان الله.
ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى. ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى. ووجدك ضالا فهدى. ووجدك عائلا فأغنى. فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر. وأما السائل فلا تنهر. وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. صدق الله العظيم.
ما شاء الله ما شاء الله. جزاك الله.
Yeah, Allah. How are you? You okay?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, thumma alhamdulillah. We're in the middle 10. Subhanallah.
Allah. The second Ashura started, yeah?
Second Ashura.
The Ashura of Maghfirah.
I don't know whether I'm happy or I'm sad that it's going quickly. I don't know.
I don't know myself. I'm noticing it to be faster than ever before. I've never seen it go fast. So
Tomorrow
fast.
we'll have completed half the Quran in Taraweeh.
Yeah, 15 days.
Flying through.
Allahu Akbar. And okay, let's start with the Tafsir of the ayat Ali just recited, Surah Duha. Yafisab, any comments? What would you share on this? Surah Duha.
It's interesting, there seems to be a theme continued from yesterday. Yesterday, Surah Yusuf was recited.
Yep.
Yesterday was mentioned, as well as today, of Sayyidatuna Khadijatul Kubra.
Yep.
And then we have Surah Duha. All of these have one thing in common. These surahs were revealed at times to boost morale.
Yep.
And to make us feel happy, so to speak. Meaning
Okay.
they were revealed at times where, for example, Surah Yusuf was revealed during the year within which Sayyidatuna Khadijatul Kubra radiyallahu anha had left his physical abode. And then Surah Yusuf was revealed. And then you've got Surah Duha, which was revealed likewise at a time where the absence of revelation for a while had left some, emotional impact, so to speak. So they were revealed to uplift the spirit. So Surah Duha, begins with the mention of the break of dawn, almost as if light is penetrating darkness and overpowering it. So it begins uplifting the spirit, and I find that amazing.
Dawn means also referring to like a new beginning.
Yeah, a new beginning,
a new day, a new era. More support from your Lord, and like Hafiz mentioning, like uplifting the spirit of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then of course you have the ulama that go into the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, describing that this dawn refers to the blessed nur of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's face. Duha, and then وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى, and when the night casts over you, i.e. that referring to the hair of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he would comb his hair, when he would take us Imam Sharif off, and for combing and for combing purposes, you could see his hair was so dark it would resemble the darkness of the night.
Subhanallah.
And we know from the Shama'il of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, and it's amazing how the companions adored the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah, they would gaze into him for so long that they'd be able to count the number of hair that he had in his blessed beard. And as we know from the Shama'il, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a total of 18 white hair. I mean, isn't that, in itself, the number,
like to be able to count it,
to count the number of hair. Like, I've got loads, but I don't know how many I've got.
Yeah.
Never mind somebody else picking on how many white hair I've got.
So that's something I call, as I told you, I was compiling some work on Tafsir.
Yeah.
And I'm still on Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim to this day. It's almost been a year. And that's what I've called Tafsir bil Mahabba.
Okay.
Where you have Tafsir, where people approach it linguistically, what does it mean? Then in the context, what does it mean? Then there are some people who, they were masters of the Funun, but they were masters of Mahabba. They were Imams of Ishq and Mahabba. And when they looked at verses, yes, they knew all the other stuff, but their love, allowed them to interpret it in a certain way. So where we would just see mention of certain things, they would see praise of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in ayahs that you couldn't even imagine.
No. There's Mufti Ahmad Yar Khan Naimi, the subcontinent, one of the biggest, the last 50 years, arguably one of the biggest lovers of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he's compiled a book. He's got a Tafsir of the Quran, Tafsir Naimi, which is in 30 volumes. Each volume is like 500 pages. A massive favor he's done upon the Ummah. And he's got another book, he's called Shanu Habibir Rahman Min Ayatil Quran. The praise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam through just the ayat of the Quran. So he's got a selection of about 200 ayat from Bismillah all the way to An-Nas, where Allah Rabbul Alameen had subjected the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's praise, and that's the only purpose for that ayat in the Quran.
That's what I'm trying to compile, all these aqwal of the ulama. So
yeah, so this is
I need to
something
get hold of this.
I can't believe you're not even aware of it.
No, it's in Urdu language, isn't
okay.
it?
Now inshallah I can support you, help you with that one. So Ad-Duha, and yesterday we were talking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's orphanage, and I remember coming across a tafsir of this. How does Surah Ad-Duha وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَالَى وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْطِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى أَلَمْ يَجِدْكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى. This one ayah alone compresses the entire seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just based on this one ayah, you can describe the entire seerah of Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam. Because it says, أَلَمْ يَجِدْكَ يَتِيمًا, did we not find you as an orphan? فَآوَى, and then we gave you our support. What is that support? And one of the support that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had, alluding from yesterday's discussion, is the entry of Sayyidah Khadija into the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Have you thought of it that way?
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So he was born an orphan, and orphans normally know that financially not too strong, the weak, and generally, unless Allah blesses them, they do live a financially weak life, even without having the support of their parents.
وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى
فَأَغْنَى
is referring to the mal of
Sayyidatuna Khadija
radiyallahu anha. Wow.
This, going back to Sayyidah Khadija radiyallahu anha, which we were mentioning yesterday, and she supported the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam financially. His biggest support. In fact, when it comes to Amul Huzn, the year where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam felt sorrow, I know contemporary scholars don't even like to use the word sorrow for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The two don't go in one phrase. You can't call it the year of sorrow. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never had sorrow. It doesn't exist in his lifestyle, in the way he lives. But to what we understand to be sorrow, what we see in and around us. So he had that year where he was really down, didn't have much success the way he would have wanted, sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
With Ta'if and all these things.
With Ta'if and his uncle Abu Talib passing away, his wife Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha passing away. And why did Sayyidah Khadija leaving him sallallahu alaihi wasallam affect him so much? What do you think?
Well, she's his emotional support. You know, they say behind every great man is a great woman. She's financial support. And Nabi Sallallahu himself explains it many years later, that she supported me when the people turned against me.
Allahu Akbar.
You know, when nobody was for me, she was for me. So
is that saying that he felt a loss of support? And
definitely.
I mean, what I've come to understand from the seerah itself is that his support internally was Sayyidah Khadija, and externally the support he had was Abu Talib.
Definitely.
So in and amongst the community, the Meccan tribes and the Quraysh environment, the support the Prophet ﷺ had outside the house was Abu Talib. But whenever he came home after, and we know so many times from the seerah that when Nabi ﷺ, after an entire day of doing da'wah and a tiring day where he's been verbally abused and being pushed around, being called names, he's come home not feeling too well, and the one to comfort him is Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha.
Both these ayahs, Alam yajidka yatiman fa'awa is referring to Abu Talib, wajadaka a'ilan fa'aghna is referring to Sayyidah Khadija, and both of them are lost in that year.
Both of them the year.
And from the divine wisdom, till the hour is established, that year is known as the year of sorrow, which really demonstrates the severity of the loss that we as an ummah, definitely, you know, with the passing of anybody. And they weren't just anybody, they were the internal and external, as you said, support of the Prophet
sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this also shows in itself, doesn't it, the connection between Sayyidah Khadija and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For him to feel so much pain, that the only way to lift his mood now is to now take him on the night of Mi'raj, give him Isra and Mi'raj. It's the only way you can lift his mood. And you know, one of the medical solutions given when somebody goes through a major loss, and he's not recovering from depression and mental stress, they do prescribe that you go on a holiday. You know, change of air and water and environment, scenery. Go out, travel somewhere, and you come back feeling better. The exact same thing happened for Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam. He's lost his two major personalities that play a major role in his life, and when they've gone, he sallallahu alayhi wasallam is taken on to Isra Miraj. He's shown all the favors that await him and his ummah on the Day of Judgment. Shown paradise, shown all the Anbiya alayhimus salam. Everything takes place, so that when he comes back, he's feeling a lot better. He's recovered. But the point I wanted to touch on today was the love between the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his blessed wives. You know, yesterday's podcast, I've had so many messages. People have personally thanked and appreciated the subject that we touched.
Mashallah.
Because not many people speak of the marriage life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we only highlighted a few bits. But over here, the loss of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha, that's the sukoon of the house, isn't it? And in the ninth juz,
هو الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة
هو الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وجعل
منها زوجها
ليسكن إليها. This one ayah, this ليسكن إليها, sums up what a marriage relationship should be. And that Allah Rabbul Alameen says that we made you from one man, one woman. And then repeat the ayah again.
هو الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وجعل منها
زوجها, and then from that we made you your partners. And what was the purpose behind having a spouse? ليسكن إليها, that you may find sukoon from her. Sukoon means, obviously we all have physical needs, we have sexual needs as well, which only your wife can fulfill. If that need is executed in any other means than marriage, that's haram. Allah knows. زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ وَالْبَنِينَ. Allah knows, He's designed us, hasn't He? He knows that a man and a woman, we have hormones, we have
Mhm.
desires, we have attraction for the opposite gender. But at the same time, Allah says, I know I've given you this. You've been this, like the nowadays, in Corona, what we had is production of cars has been really slow because of the chip.
Oh yes.
Yeah? So you can imagine this way: we've got a chip inside us, which brings about temptation and desire
Yep.
for the opposite gender.
Yep.
And Allah Ta'ala categorically goes through those desires. You have Hubbu Shahawati min nisa, women, wal baneen,
Children.
and children, wal qanatir,
Gold, silver, the
gold,
full
silver,
shebang.
dhahab, wal khayl, wal fidda. Yeah, all of these things. But Allah Rabbul Alameen at the same time describes to us, He gives us a parameter. This is the halal framework, this is the haram one. So any relationship before marriage is haram. In marriage, perfectly halal. Do whatever you want. But the purpose is liyaskuna ilayha, so that you find peace, sukoon, peace of mind, peace of heart when you spend time with your spouse. And one of those sukoon is obviously the sexual element of a relationship, which is a physical need Allah has instilled.
Even when I translate, I say sukoon is stability.
Yeah, you could put
The opposite of taharruk is sukoon.
Yeah.
So to create stability within your life is why Allah creates your spouse for you. And she gave that stability, that financial, as you said, that internal within the household. There's a hadith I came across, the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would be so happy just on the sight of Sayyidah Khadija, just to see her. So stability.
It's all the emotions, isn't it? So when you say you're married, a marriage is not just a house, bricks and mortar, windows, doors, roof over your head. When you're married, it's a home. There's a difference between a home and a house. So when you say that Prophet ﷺ felt a loss, it's almost as if someone's taken part of his home away, because for him to come home to basically be able to find that peace away from the effects that he was facing, subdued to outside in the real world, and to escape from that, to come home to somebody who basically was the emotional support, the mental support, and the financial support at that time.
Just as you mentioned that there's a difference between a house and a home, there's a piece of poetry I just came across. It says, الدار ليست بالبناء جميلة إن الديار جميلة بذويها قد يعشق الإنسان أسوأ بقعة ويزورها من أجل شخص فيها. He said houses are not made beautiful because of how they're built, rather houses are beautiful because of who's in them.
MashaAllah.
Sometimes a person loves the worst of places, but he will visit because of someone who's in there. There's a poem there.
I mean, I remember coming across a comment like, a good wife can make a beggar feel like a king at home.
Yeah.
And one that gives a lot of a difficult life to her husband can make a king feel like a slave in the house.
I think an alternate way of saying that is a woman can turn the home into a lofty paradise or a burning hell.
Definitely.
She can lead a husband to the peak of success or the dregs of misfortune. A woman with the qualities bestowed on her by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is aware of her role and spouse, can elevate her husband to a respected man, even if he has been the lowest of all men.
Oh.
That wasn't from memory, by the way. I read that just now.
You read that? Oh, mashallah.
I was going to say where these pearls come from.
the all-wise Shuaib, eh?
Mashallah.
Mashallah. Yeah, so married life. Shuaib, mashallah, has been married for many years, has got 2 kids. Alhamdulillah, I've been married for several years, and alhamdulillah, I have a daughter. So we can elaborate from experience as well, and of our read and knowledge of what's happening in our society. And we mentioned this yesterday, and I'd like to continue from where we left. The last point we mentioned was that a lot of problems that happen during marriage, when you boggle down to like the crux of it, it's because they don't know their rights. They're working too hard, and they're going beyond what they should really be doing. What would you say?
There is a saying that says all good things come to an end, and unfortunately that does happen in a marriage as well. And
so would you say then it's imperative that
imams have to
keep
maintain
creating new good things?
Absolutely.
Then,
It's about maintaining.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Wow.
It's being proactive and being able to understand when something does fall into the negative realms, how to turn that into a positive, and also how to make sure that, just going off that saying of good things sometimes come to an end, that you're aware of that. Because scientifically, I think there are some studies in America where the 7th year is the most challenging. I don't know why it's the 7th year, but apparently the highest divorce rates are in the 7th year, 6th year, 7th year. So I mean, you do say also there's a honeymoon period, 6 months, 6-7 months. So I don't know if that figure 6 or 7 comes into it. But
it can go for years, couldn't it?
That's if you make it last year's, yeah.
Yeah, you got to
absolutely.
maintain it, like Hamza was saying. You got to maintain it. No,
I think the problem nowadays is people go into the marriage expecting the wrong things, and then those things aren't delivered, and so the other person ends up trying to create things that the other person never wanted in the first place. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it's about fairness and balance.
Yeah. A lot of the time is down to this perception, this pursuit of wealth. Nabi Sallallahu never married Sayyidah Khadija for her wealth alone. It's not just for that. But he married for the right reasons, and Allah gave him so much wealth. She was literally the richest person there. They used to call her Sayyidatu Quraysh, you know, the mistress, Amiratu Quraysh, the leader of Quraysh, you know, due to her wealth. There's a poem that came to mind about wealth. I thought I'd share it.
Alright, go for it.
You're going to love this one, especially students of Arabic language. Imam al-Shafi'i, our master, from the household of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He says, رَأَيْتُ النَّاسَ قَدْ مَالُوا
Okay.
إِلَى مَنْ عِنْدَهُ مَالٌ وَمَنْ لَا عِنْدَهُ مَالٌ فَعَنْهُ النَّاسُ قَدْ مَالُوا رَأَيْتُ النَّاسَ قَدْ ذَهَبُوا إِلَى مَنْ عِنْدَهُ ذَهَبٌ وَمَنْ لَا عِنْدَهُ ذَهَبٌ فَعَنْهُ النَّاسُ قَدْ ذَهَبُوا رأيت الناس منفضة إلى من عنده فضة ومن لا عنده فضة فعنه الناس منفضة. He said, I see people, they lean towards...
You know, only Imam Shafi could pull that off.
They lean towards to that person who has wealth. And that person who doesn't have wealth, people lean away from him. He said, I've seen people go towards that person who has gold. And that person doesn't have gold, then people go away from him. He said, I've seen people disassociate and go towards people who have silver, and those people who don't have silver, then the people disassociate from them. I mean, people are chasing money all the time, isn't it? And you know, when you begin something wrong, if the asal is wrong,
Allahu Akbar,
then everything goes back to the asal. No matter what you do, if the foundation is wrong, and subhanAllah, we talked about foundations today.
Yeah, in
the Quran.
Yeah, أصلها ثابت وفرعها في السماء.
So Allah gives you an example. He says, Alam tara kayfa darab Allah. Do you not see how Allah strikes an example for you of good words, referring to the kalima tayyibah, the kalima of tawheed, but we can extend that to good beginnings, good objectives, good foundations. It's like kashajaratin tayyibah. It's like a good tree. Asluha thabit
وفرعها في السماء.
Its foundations are well rooted, and so its fruits will reach the sky.
And I'm glad you mentioned this as well, so it could take me to my next point that comes to mind. You mentioned that when the foundation, the purpose, the niyyah, the intention behind this marriage and this the conducting of this marriage, those foundations have to be pure. They have to be good. If that's weak, then the entire framework falls apart. And you mentioned wealth as being one of the reasons why people marry. And the hadith, now see, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam he knows us all too well.
Of course. An-Nabi awla bil mu'minin.
Awla bil mu'minin. He's closer to you than yourself, than you realize. He understands human psyche. He understands what our needs and how we behave as humans. So you know the famous hadith which ulama recite, and when it comes to nikah, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when going through the reasons for marriage, you know, the categories, he says sallallahu alayhi wasallam, tunkahul mar'atu li arba'in. A woman is married to for 4 reasons.
4 reasons.
And the first one he gives is li maliha, for her wealth. He didn't say her beauty. He didn't say the other 4, the other 3 which I'll mention now. But the first thing he said was li maliha, because ultimately that's what man is always after. Human is always after wealth.
They're after women, but if they can have a woman with wealth,
Oh, that's
they got two birds, one stone.
that's the cherry on the cake, isn't it?
That's it, icing
Yeah.
on the cake.
So it's limaliha, number one. Then if it's not mal or after mal will be lihasabiha, because of her family background. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, third category, third station, he said li jamaliha, for her beauty. And lastly he said li diniha, and for her religion. And ulama then elaborated on this. Why this particular category, this category of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Why this order? You'll go for the wealth first, because that's what gives you success. A man knows beauty is not going to last forever. So what's better? Would you rather trade wealth, or would you want beauty, something that's going to decline? But wealth is which will accumulate, will keep growing. You rather marry somebody with that wealth, she comes in, your business empire grows. Imagine she's also a millionaire, and you've got some money as well stuck there. You know, by you getting married to this woman, the amount of contacts you get, the places you get to be, the cars you get to sit in, the sittings that you have now, automatically your standard of living goes so high.
Imam Sahib, is this a step-by-step nature, inner nature?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The
That's
Prophet
what
sallallahu alaihi
he
wasallam
knows.
knew.
He knows
He
what we
knew
want.
our psychology. And then he said you marry because of family. Okay, now what does family mean? Family means, look, if I get married into that brotherly there, bro, they're loaded.
So she's not rich, but her family's rich.
Family's rich.
So if I get in there, I'll have some of that wealth as
So
well.
when they have their parties or they have their da'was and going on, I'm going to sit amongst all the ministers and the MPs and the councillors. And again, you're thinking like, rah, I got all these rich men I get to sit along with. So that's the second reason why people marry. And then he says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, li jamaliha, for the beauty. And finally he said, sallallahu alaihi, I don't need to elaborate on beauty anyway. So, and the fourth one, walidiniha, for the religion. Then ulama also describe, if you get married for wealth only, then the ulama describe that she will bully you. Because she knows she's in a dominant position. You as a man, where you want to show your manness, your manhood, and you want to be in control, you're no longer in control.
It's a
Because
level
now
of, it's a
you're-
level
you
of
dominate.
dignity. It's a level of dignity that the man will face as well. So knowing that the opposite
Yeah.
the partner in the relationship has more power over the other, the balances tip a little bit.
He's lost control
He's lost,
already
yeah,
from the
yeah.
beginning.
Already from the
It's
beginning.
male ego, you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
ulama have discussed this in quite some depth, as in what are the problems with these options. If you get married because of her family, then they describe that, again, they will belittle you, make you feel like nothing. Because they know who they are from an elite family, for example. And next man comes along and he's joining the family. He's never sat amongst those.
He's outcast.
He's outcasted straight away. He doesn't know how to sit amongst them. He doesn't know how to speak amongst them. He doesn't know how to dress like them. He has no idea. So what happens then? He gets bullied again. He's going to get turned down.
So he's out
Yes.
of his comfort zone as well.
Way out of his comfort zone. And then before you know it, after a few years, he'll want to find the exit. He wants to leave because now he's not enjoying himself. Like we just, from the ayah, liyaskuna ilayha, that he finds peace and stability by being with her. That stability is not there
It's not
at
there,
all.
no.
And then you get married for the beauty, and which we know, give it a few years, let her pop few kids straight away. That beauty is not going to remain there. She ain't going to keep that same figure. A lot of the time, the figure that we have in mind, she's going to look like this and X, Y, Z. That she will not maintain. After she's had a few children, with age, men put on weight. After women, men get a stomach. Women put on weight as well. That's
So she'll
natural.
lose that beauty.
Yeah, that's not going to remain there.
Yeah.
Now, if you were getting married for the beauty only, then what happens is after a few years, or after, fast forward 10 years in the marriage, now he starts to look left and right. He's no longer interested in that woman now. Because, remember, like you said, if the asal is correct, the reason for marriage is correct, it will last.
Yeah.
When your reasoning was beauty, and now you've lost that attraction with that one woman. Now you'll be looking for affairs outside the marriage. And like a majority of the time in our Indo-Pak society and custom, you mention a second wife, bro, you're gonna get smashed.
You'll have none after that.
Yeah, you'll have none. Yeah, even the one that you had, she'll be gone as well. Then you'll be stranded. And you can imagine the turmoil and the tribulation that you go through, and people have a difficult time, especially in our cultures that we come from, even mentioning a second wife. Allahu Akbar. So you'll be so now what happens when you can't get married to a second one because of peer pressure, family pressure, your parents, your cousins, nobody's allowing you to. You can't even have a discussion with them.
You're going to look elsewhere now, innit?
Yeah.
You're going to look to haram.
Now you're going to look to haram.
Do you know what's interesting?
Haram.
I was discussing with, he's actually a colleague from university, and he's studying psychology.
Okay.
And he said, when you follow the Sunnah is your protection.
Subhan.
Right? The fact that Nabi Sallallahu gives us so many advices when it comes to marriage is so that you have a sustainable, long-lasting marriage. Because if you married, he gave an example, it's a bit touchy, but for example, why is it that from the Sunnah, for those people who are educated in it, it's to have, you know, your nighttime relationships in the dark? Why is it that Islam promotes you to be covered even in those, you know, God-given rights? You know, it's your right at that time to do what you want as you please, closed doors. But why does the Sunnah have a teaching for it? So from a psychological point of view, he was talking about, you know, if it's only the physical beauty that attracts you, that makes you approach her, then one day that beauty is going to fade and you're no longer going to be attracted. Right? And people have tried, when they're not attracted, to continue giving rights to their wives, but they'll always pick up on it. Eventually they won't give as much as you give. Eventually things are falling apart. You're going to look elsewhere, be it second wife or be it illicit. If you marry someone for her wealth alone, like you said, that wealth going to fade. Eventually, you know, because she's lording over him, he's going to look for someone who respects him. If you marry someone into that, you know, high status, that lofty status family, they're going to make him feel outcasted. He's going to go look for someone from his own caste. So deen is the only one that allows you to look past all of that. If you have deen, if she's rich, or I mean if she's not rich, because of the sake of deen, you know the virtues of poverty, you'll learn the virtues of patience, and Allah will enrich you in other ways. If because of deen, that when you see a lady from a not so good background, you know that Islam doesn't care about those things. You know that inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, that the true value is within her piety. And likewise, if it's because of beauty, then deen will teach you that, you know, people are not married for their physical form only. Like deen is the one thing that allows you to look past all those things when they fade, and they will fade. So that's the ultimate wisdom.
Imam Sahib, there is that additional thing that if you look at wealth, beauty, and family background, the company that the person's in, or the hierarchy of career, or whatever the person's in, if you look at those three things, so sometimes what's happening through a lot of friends that I know, and family as well, they look at those things and they try to attain that for the pleasure of the marriage, to maintain a marriage. So where you're saying if you go for wealth or beauty, those two things, sometimes what happens is you try and attain that, you try and portray the wealth, you try and portray the beauty, and then also you try and achieve the satisfaction in the wife's understanding that she is beautiful, and you maintain that the wealth that she has is obviously sufficient, but in deep down inside you may not be content.
That's
but you carry on, you carry on, and sometimes that is
you'll come to that breaking point.
Yeah, it's a breaking point. It becomes destructive, self-destructive over time. So where you're saying that obviously marital relationships in the dark to maintain that longevity really of a marriage, longevity of a marriage. But then the opposite happens as well. You can also get longevity of destruction. So by obviously pretending that everything's okay, pretending that wealth is good and you're happy with the situation, that doesn't just go for men, for women as well nowadays, where okay, I'm doing this for the sake of Islam, doing this for the sake of my husband, but deep down inside it's eating me. I'm not content, I'm not happy, but that doesn't show in physical, it shows in physiological and emotional.
I think Islam recognizes that it doesn't always work out. You could marry for the right reasons, you could have the correct intentions, but it doesn't always work out. And that's why Islam allows divorce. Islam at a certain time can recommend divorce. We know that divorce is something you shouldn't go towards, But there'll come a moment where divorce is the only option, and Islam doesn't say no. Yeah, you know, like in Christian culture, it's still death do us
Marriage
part.
for life.
Yeah. In Hindu culture, it's eternity, even in reincarnation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Islam doesn't have that.
Even within the Jewish sects, they have similar things as well, where you can't divorce a woman.
Yeah, so Islam doesn't have that. Islam is as long as you can support each other and give each other's rights, and then you're right for each other. And the moment you can't no more, then that's not the end of the world.
Yeah,
you're allowed to break it off, so to speak. So, but what we're saying is that should you do it for religious purposes, you have the best chance at having longevity. Is what we're saying.
This is why the Prophet ﷺ finished the hadith of فَذْفُرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ. That it means that, you know, when you bite into something, bite into it so hard that you'll never let go. فَذْفُرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ تَرِبَتْ يَدَاكَ. Now taribat yadak can have so many different meanings, because it was like, it's a phrase from the Arabs of that time, which means, look, you're going to get your hands dirty if you were to go for any of the other options other than deen being your priority. You're going to get your hands dirty. And at the same time, I remember discussing it with my father, asking, what does taribat yadak actually mean? Because when you read the translation of this,
it means you got soil in your hands.
You got soil in your hands, or so many different translations you get.
Dirty soil, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
but my father goes, there's an element of anger as well in these words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Taribat yadak. You're gonna get your hands dirty if you go down the wrong route. Make sure your deen is always the priority.
Yeah.
And when that happens, like Hafiz mentioned, then you've got a better chance of it lasting longer. Why?
Yeah.
Because if both know their deen, and by knowing deen means both know their rights.
Their rights, yeah.
Alluding from what I just said before, one of the biggest reasons for divorce taking place is because they don't know their rights. Either one of the spouses burns out, works too hard, and before you know it, they want out. But when you know both have married for the deen, your priority was not her wealth or her family background or her beauty. In fact, you sacrificed these three to find somebody who knew her rights. And I, you know, a lot of students ask, you know, what should be our criteria for, you know, when we look for a spouse? And I say, look, you need to look for mother material.
Mother material. It's not just your wife; she's the mother of your children.
You don't just need a partner in bed, which a lot of students and, you know, youngsters will get wrong. For them, they're just looking for that short-term, you know, the desires that they have, let's suppose, and that's the only thing in mind. So now they're looking for beauty, or they want to get rich, so they're looking for wealth or whatever. But when you sacrifice all of these things, and you're not looking for a partner to sleep with, in fact, you're looking for somebody who has the qualities to become a mother. Look at your mother and how she's given you that upbringing and that support she's given you, and she's always been there, and she's always supported your father. Yeah, she's always been, and like I've mentioned, that behind every successful man, there's a powerful woman that's who's always supported. Do you really think she's going to support you for the rest of your life?
There's an ayah in the Quran that just flashed in front of me, where you're talking about people want the short term. There's an ayah that Allah says, "Ma indakum yanfad, wa ma inda Allahi baq." And I interpret that as what you want is short term, but what Allah's got for you is long term.
What Allah can deliver is long term. And through religion and her religious awareness is where that longevity which you were mentioning comes from, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I'm sure if you went to the universities now around the country and you said, okay, well, you two are looking at each other for marriage, do you realise that you should marry for deen? The answer will be yes. But then ask them really why they're marrying, and it won't be the forefront of what their reason is. It's if you bring that up, then the answer is always going to be yes. It's like, why do you read namaz? Read namaz for Allah's sake. Or do you actually read it because your dad told you to?
If you quiz anyone, and then they're always going to be the most pious person in front of you.
Absolutely what I'm saying.
But we're saying we're actually appealing to you to ask yourself rather than us ask you. Yes. Ask yourself why you're doing it.
And also, if you've got options, you've got 3-4 proposals coming through, ask yourself, of these 3 or these 4, which one do I see the most pious? The one that knows of her rights, or he, vice versa as well. We're not just picking on the sisters here, but men likewise. So when you're now looking for a spouse, or a sister is, ask yourself, that brother, I've got few rishtas I've come through, my mum has mentioned, which one of them actually knows the religion? Which one do I see to be the husband or to be the father of my children? Who can take my son to the masjid on a daily basis, do I see that in him? Do I see that he's paying his zakah so that his wealth is halal? Do I see that, you know, he's fasting, he's aware of you know, he's conscious of Allah, isn't he? These things we have to ask. And a lot of times when you know, our mothers, or you go to that rishta auntie in your community, we all have one in every in every
culture,
in
every background,
every few streets you'll see a rishta auntie somewhere, yeah. And it's the one Maji that sat there and has the contact for everyone in your community, and she's probably even got a list. But ask yourself, when you go to her and when you're with your parents, for example, and your parents go and describe like this, we're looking for somebody. Just pay attention. What's many a times, or at large speaking, what are our priorities when we look for a spouse? When the parents go there to the rishta auntie and ask the first thing, does he have a degree? Has he got a house? Has he got a car? Has he got a house? What's his wage?
That's questions about stability, isn't it? It's questions about stability.
I don't think they're wrong questions.
They're not wrong questions.
That hadith doesn't say any of them are wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't say to marry someone for their beauty is wrong necessarily. It's saying if you do it for the purpose of deen, you have the best chance at longevity.
Okay, if you look at it this way, with the divorce rates at the moment, what's the difference between 2020 and modern times to say, like, for example, early 1990s, probably before that as well, where it was slightly on the raise, but
it's definitely on the high. It's definitely on the high.
It's definitely on the high side. The divorce rates are definitely increasing.
I've had examples whereby you'll be shocked. Just about a few years ago, at when I was leading Jummah Salahs at Quba Masjid, and this elderly came along and said, Hafsab, I need a few minutes. You go ahead. Sat on the side in the room. Goes, I've just got my son married. It's only been 2 months. I splashed £50,000 on that marriage. And after 2 months, they're now considering divorce.
Could have just given that in dowry. Would have been better.
Yeah.
So what do you think the influence
these
was?
Are happening.
What do you think the influence was?
Both of them were professionals, by the way.
Yeah.
So we can't say like one of them was ignorant, didn't know her rights or his rights, and it could go in all directions, couldn't it? But what we're saying here is giving priority to deen only increases chances of it lasting longer, because you'll know we're making sacrifices for each other.
Following through on that choice as well. I know of probably 2 cases I can call of recent times where 2 people, relatively religious, act religious, good thing all the time. They want to get married for religious purposes, but they went about the nikah in terms of the extravagance that took place and the traditions, totally against religion. It was totally shocking. And then you find problems within that marriage. So it's not just...
that's you open a can of worms there.
It's not just you thinking, I'm picking her for deen. It's about following through. Now let's stick on the path of deen.
Right to the end.
The deen, right, you've picked her. The deen now governs how you're going to do that nikah as well now. Make sure that's deen. Make sure everything else is deen.
I have a question.
Go on.
I was going to ask, about nowadays, a lot of people get divorced because they've had a haram relationship before their marriage. So let's say you know someone who's having a haram relationship. How would you advise him to come out of the relationship and remind him of the punishments for it?
Oh, good question, that. I mean, see, the problem with having relationships before marriage, from my understanding of it at least, marriage, Allah Ta'ala wants to keep it so pure that you experience romance, you experience love, and sharing a piece of your heart with somebody else. After marriage, that's when you know it's pure. And the two, when they come together now, they experiment. They've not been married or they've not had a relationship before. So that's a pure relationship that they're building together as they go along. If you've had prior experiences, you've had a few girlfriends from before or a few boyfriends, issue that becomes a problem now is that once you go to marriage and it's not one of those girls or one of those boys that you've been with, what happens is now you're looking for the best qualities from the first boyfriend you had. You want the best from the second boyfriend and the best from the third one. And now when you get married to the husband who's a fourth man in your life, now you're like, he needs to be the superhero that needs to have all the good qualities of 1, A, B, C and D.
That's the problem when you...
It's not going to happen. These are false expectations we have.
Yeah, when you have too much choice, it's like you're always going to be chasing the best because you've had alternatives, whereas if it's your only one, it is the best.
Yeah, because that's
You don't know
that's
anything
the
better, yeah.
only exposure you've had.
Yeah, the innocence
That's the only-
disappears in the relationship.
Exactly,
The innocence
exactly,
goes.
exactly.
Yeah.
So then what happens is, look, now the worst thing you want, Ali, I'm not picking you. You only ask the question. The worst thing that can happen is that in the middle of that marriage, she now starts to refer to those men, or he starts to. Yeah, she used to do something like that. Why don't you do it that way? My ex used to do something like that. You've never done it like that. And the moment any one of the spouses has a comment come across in that way, khalas, that's the end of it.
It's finished.
Because that says that you've still kept that person in your heart. Whereas, let's for example, this man has gone into this marriage with a complete clean heart. He's never experienced romance with anyone, and she's had prior experiences. It only alludes towards chaos.
Yeah.
So this is the problem with
That's
having
going to damage him so badly.
pre-marriage, relationships. And I'll even touch on here, allow me, and the panel is open to dispute. Even pre-marriage contact.
Okay.
I personally believe even that's wrong and damaging. Now,
Which, because of culture, is quite common now, innit? They do
which is very
engagement,
common.
but
Yeah,
not the nikah.
Straight after the engagement, the first thing that they do, they share contacts. Now they're on WhatsApp. They speak to each other. I personally know somebody in my community.
When you say contact, you mean communication.
Communication, yeah. So that communication then goes beyond just WhatsApp, yeah. Then they'll meet. They'll have dinners and X, Y, Z, and
which is actually encouraged. And I think it's more a traditional cultural thing now. It's a new culture.
Yeah,
it's a new tradition.
It's picking up so bad. And what happens is, as I was mentioning, you want to go into a marriage and experience something pure, unique, that started on the night of the marriage.
But
now
Imam said there is something that's triggering this behaviour, and it's the divorce rates. People are now scared, and they're feeling that
I think
there's something that's going on here.
I get what you're trying
Maybe
to say.
there's no understanding between the couple.
Divorce is happening so regularly, and someone said to me, it's happening with good people, it's happening with bad people. So what's the harm if I get to know her first? That's what he said.
Yeah.
So that I know she's compatible for me. So people have come through because of divorce rates to justify it.
Allah. But my argument is, look, what's happening now is, pre-marriage contact. The issue that I see, and from a few cases I've become aware of, is that before the nikah takes place, they've already shared everything that they had to share. As in terms of their character, in terms of the romance that they wanted to experience. They've experienced everything within those 6 months. On the marriage, on the night of the marriage, the only thing left to do is to have the physical relationship. Other than that, they've already got to know each other. Then what happens is, quickly after the marriage, which if there was no contact, they would have climaxed and they would have understood each other so well, and they would have achieved so much. Now that achievement is not there.
So it becomes boring now. There's nothing to explore, nothing to
learn. Other than the physical factor, there's nothing else that's left in that marriage.
I think
once they've done everything that they had craved, now they realise, what, is this it? Is this all the marriage had to offer us? That's one issue I've seen. And so, we're coming to divorce rates increasing. I would blame pre-marriage contact as one of the reasons.
I think
my argument.
Yeah, absolutely do. However, I think the theme so far is longevity, isn't it? It's making sure that the marriage is from day one. It lasts 100 years, whether we live that long or not.
Into that, saying 100 years, but it will last for a lot longer.
You aim for the best in the marriage.
Another experience I've come across is that pre-marriage contact. Another problem that happens is that. So this brother I was mentioning, he went through 4 engagements. 4 manganiyan took place, and with each one they had pre-marriage contact. So they get the 2 set up. Now they start to discuss and get to know each other, and within those few months they've realized, what, it's not going to work. So end of it. And why is it not real? How they've realized this so quickly? Well, he's commented on me a few times like this. If he's doing this before marriage, imagine what's it going to be like when we become husband and wife and things settle down. Or look, let's say he's disappointed me at whatever situation. He could become so worse after marriage. I can't believe this is happening. So he turns the engagement down and to marry. This happened 4 times. Okay, when it comes to the 5th time, no pre-marriage contact. They get married straight. The bombshell hits. They get married. Now, alhamdulillah, they've got 2 kids. They've been to Hajj together. And I'm like, yeah, what was wrong before? And what I've come to realize is that pre-marriage contact and the false hope, false expectations that you have. And you're coming back to that divorce issue. So pre-marriage, of course, you're going to be on your best behavior. Let's be real. Yeah? You're going to have a face on. You're always going to dress well. Whenever you go to meet her or any messages, everything lovey-dovey, romantic, and you're on your best behavior, basically. Yeah? Straight after marriage, give it a few months, a few years, and now things settle down, and now you've become casual as well. Now those romantic comments and that dress code and that maintenance is no longer there. Now she's thinking like, or he's thinking, vice versa, both, yeah? Right, I never knew this is what's going to happen. He was never like this before. And now you start to think, okay, do I really want this for the rest of my life? So and what you're comparing this to is the first few months pre-marriage, what you had put on. And they expect that to last forever. And when that's not happening, now they're wanting to find the exit. So all of these issues, problems are rising, and people are experiencing. These are not fake stories I'm making up. I can give you names, addresses, everything, but that's not the point. The point being, look, I'm sure you'll trust what I'm saying.
Data Protection Act.
Yeah, Data Protection Act.
Data Protection.
Point being, these are scenarios not from PK or from across the globe. These are happening in Manchester, around us, what we are seeing, what we are noticing. Yeah. And, we have to strike that balance. We have to be real in approaching marriage. And coming to the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, فَذْفُرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ, give religion that priority. And when you give that priority, you'll see so much barakah in that.
So, what do you say to someone who's in a haram relationship, who's a Muslim as well? Okay. What do you say to him to try to stop him?
Try to stop him.
There's 2 things that Imam Sabi picked up on, and obviously going off that question as well with the haram relationship. One is start as you mean to continue. So if you're having like 4 engagements or haram relationship, and then you're ending that and starting another one before you find the spouse, it's starting as you mean to continue. So when you eventually find the person that you're going to settle and marry and expect to have that long, happy, successful relationship called a marriage in a halal way, are you then in a habit at that point that you've met people, and then all of a sudden you're now having to settle for one? Is your mind going to settle at that point? The other thing is that if you are in a halal relationship, you got to remember, let's just pick a halal relationship. I'm sure we've all got friends, or not always Muslim, but any culture, any tradition. Haram. So in that relationship, you have no family, you have no responsibilities, you have a home that you don't live in together, 9 times out of 10 nowadays, actually. But you have no responsibilities ultimately. So you are actually going back to your own home, and then there's no family involvement. So you're not getting the questions, okay, so you're due our house for dinner, you're due there for dinner. There's no responsibilities again. So in a halal relationship, there's no responsibilities. From the word go, it's fake. From the word go, it's not a marriage.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
It's a completely different scenario when you're married. And that's what gets forgotten. So people go into the marriage expecting the trip to Nando's to be every Wednesday, as it used to be. The trip to the movies to be every Friday, like it used to be. But
Orange Wednesday.
They don't account for, well, I said Orange Wednesdays. Does that still exist?
I don't know.
Ask the panel, no. But they expect to continue as they've started. So it's in the reverse plot now. Are they expecting to continue as they started? It's a completely different scenario.
That's what you need Deen for, and it keeps you sober. It makes you realize that
you in line.
The objective of marriage isn't for me to love you forever or you to love me. It's for us to give each other's rights and help each other get to Jannah, whatever it takes. So it takes away that sense of too much romanticism, because that can be poisonous for you. You know.
I mean, if you go off what you're seeing on Instagram,
That's
on Snapchat, where they're only sharing the good moments, you don't realize how many lows they've had in their life.
Exactly.
And if you're only seeing the pictures where they've gone out for food or where they're smiling, behind every smile, you don't know how much pain there is and what they're having to experience. And constantly, and one thing that we do wrong is we compare marriage relationships. I think that is so wrong of our community to do.
Yeah.
Every relationship is unique. Yeah? Your temperaments are unique. Your energies that you give off are unique. The relationship that you have with your spouse is unique, and only you know how you can handle it.
Yeah, like
it's never to be
I
compared.
know of a case that a certain acquaintance of ours, who we both know, common individual, he told me that person was having problems in their marriage, and they went to this Maulana who's not from their context, he's not from this day and age, etc., and he's got a successful marriage, no problem. The Maulana said, this is what worked for me, you go do it. End up breaking their marriage. And that's just touching on what you said, that every marriage is unique and the solution to each problem is unique. Everything has to be addressed separately.
Yeah, this is why, marriage counselling, you can't just have a few template answers that you've got ready. And if somebody comes to you, okay, I've seen this case similarly before, whack, here's your answer, go. It doesn't work that way. That marriage counsellor should sit down, see where the crux of the matter is, and get rid of that issue.
Also, nowadays in school, in uni, in places, you end up having to either work with a girl opposite gender, or something like that. So you end up having to interact with them. What are the boundaries to that? Because sometimes when you do end up interacting, you end up going wrong. You end up doing wrong things.
It's your intention, isn't it? If you're going for work, then your intention is for work. If you're at school doing homework in a group that's been obviously put a task to you,
you just remind yourself of the objective.
You maintain the objective,
and you keep your relationship professional.
Yeah.
The moment it becomes casual, and then now this group is going out for food, and then they're going out for chills, and then before you know it, they're going out for the nightlife, and then you end up indulging in haram. I've been to university away from home. That's how it's always started. It starts like you don't even know that girl, but you put in a group assignment. After that, you've got to make a WhatsApp group. From that, you get her private number, you're messaging, you're now meeting outside of that group as well. And now you're indulging in haram. And Allahu Alam, how much sin is being committed. The access now that we have to the opposite gender, we've never had before in our history. Yeah? Our forefathers and going all the way to Adam a.s. have never had so much exposure as we have in this one lifetime alone. And this is what, people like, Muhammad, it's a good question. A lot of the youngsters do question, where are the limits? So there's nothing wrong in knowing somebody or being in that group and working with a girl or vice versa. But what is wrong is when it becomes casual, and now that it starts to make a home in your heart. That's where the problem lies.
Yeah, I was speaking to Hafiz, who both know, a very wise individual, and he was saying that every single female has something that you like.
Yeah.
So the more of them you know, the more things you're going to pick out on that you actually fancy. Then when you end up marrying a person, you're going to be chasing those traits, and she doesn't have it. Every single female is different. So that's one of the dangers of the open interaction. So there is a way to have healthy gender interaction. And like Shoaib was saying, you remind yourself of the objectives, keep it professional. But when you take it casual, you open the door to not just to ruin yourself now, but to ruin a potential marriage in the future as well.
Yeah, so when you do get married,
it's going to haunt you. It's going to be like, that girl, she spoke like this and I liked it. Okay, now your wife don't speak like that. And so you're always going to be chasing it. She's always going to be one level down. She's going to be second best for the rest of her life, and she don't know it. So it can be bad.
That's where marriage is.
Inshallah, the reverse can happen as well, where your wife is the best person you've come across.
It has to be the best.
She can be. If she's the only person you've come across, she's automatically the best today.
Yeah.
Because that's the only example,
That's
the only relationship you've had. The only exposure that you've had to the opposite gender is in the nikah, without pre-marriage contact, and it's unique. It's so pure that the two now build this relationship together from scratch. that's where it then starts to last.
Do you
That's
know,
from my experience.
Yeah,
at least.
no, I completely agree with you. There is something that I wanted to say about before marriage.
Right.
Before marriage, we are assessing the other person in terms of family, wealth, beauty. We're going to do that naturally anyway.
You finish off.
So what I'm going to say there is that there's something we need to just separate that we always forget, and that is there's two aspects of a person. The first aspect is their nature being their inner character, within the first 5 minutes, how they respond, their humility, their humbleness. That will always remain with them. If it does change, it's changed over time. Hopefully it will improve. I don't see nature without any experience going backwards. It always goes forward. And then that's what you see in a person. If you can remember that and then look at the second aspect of a person, which is nurture. Nurture is where they grew up, the school that they went to, the male exposure, female exposure they've had, the questions that have come from the audience and the panel today about mixing with females, mixing with males. Instagram was brought up as well. Those things influence a person over time. How you deal with that over time comes from your nature. However, bad experiences, bad habits, what you like in that person, it's not that person that you're looking at. What you're looking at is the experiences in life that they've had. If you can separate the two, then you will realize that you marry somebody because of who they are as a character, the humbleness, the humility, and then you learn to accept and understand where they've come from, who they are as a person, where they've grown up. But yes, I mean, if you look at the person's nature and nurture and calculate those, I think that will bring you onto that path of following what is said in the Deen over beauty, over wealth, and that will assist that motivation.
Sorry.
There's one thing I was going to say as well about the Instagram marriage, obviously looking at through the eyes of the camera. It's a bit like this room because we have the beauty and the wealth behind the camera today. We have two brothers, Adil and Umar, who are in the audience today.
They'll be on the panel one day.
They'll be on the panel one day.
Just a little camera shy today, that's all. Yeah, but okay. One of the
I meant wealth of knowledge, by the way.
Mashallah.
One of the things that you were mentioning, so a solution, this is why, arranged marriages, at majority of the time they go down well. Reason is because your experience that you have and exposures you've had to the opposite gender is based on what? Your time at uni. Yeah? Or only about 6-7 years of interaction, and you think you're wise enough to make your own decision. Whereas your parents have had 30, 40 odd years of experience. They've seen the highs and lows of life. They've seen people's nature change. Through their contacts, they know particular families, they know their background. Like you said, nature and nurture, having that right experience and upbringing. This is why, it's so easy and more trustable to go with the instinct of your parents. Look, your parents know you from even before you were born.
Mm-hmm.
They knew you. Yeah? They know your nature more than anyone does. And of course, they know your nurture as well. Picking up the 2 points you just mentioned. And they know when they're looking for a potential match for their child, they take those things into consideration and then put forward some names. And of course, forced marriage is complete, does not go along with Islam at all. That's not the message that Islam gives at all. Yeah? Because لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah Ta'ala doesn't burden you beyond what you can bear. And لا إكراه في الدين. There's no force in religion. Nobody can force you to marry somebody. If a parent is doing so, is doing wrong. Yeah, and we can say that with confidence on this panel. If a parent is conducting such a nikah in such a manner where that daughter or that son is being forced to marry, then that parent is doing wrong. He will be held accountable on the Day of Judgment. But if the son or the daughter accepts the decision of the parent and goes with it, then fabiha. They're making that sacrifice to please their parent. And that can also result in something beautiful as well. But generally speaking, it's not to be forced.
I was just searching. I got a collection of a lot of Arabic anecdotes, and I found what I was looking for after all this time. And it's referring to people who marry for the wrong reasons, what have you. And it says, إذا خطب الغني بنات قومي رقصن من المسرة والبشارة وإن جاء الفقير ولو تقيا ذهبن إلى صلاة الاستخارة. So it says, if a rich man comes and proposes to the daughters of our people, they can't control themselves because of happiness and what have you. But if a poor man comes, even if he's the most pious, they always go towards Salat al-Istikhara. I need to make Istikhara first.
Need to check first.
The priorities are wrong. If the priorities are right, it works out right.
A lot of the discussion we had today, it's basic. They're our emotions and the ideas we have. There's no rights, no wrongs. So when the audience does, we are coming to the end of the hour now. You may have your own views, and we respect your views, and we all agree to disagree. Yeah, fair enough. So if somebody came to me wanting advice, this is probably the advice I will give. Otherwise, you guys, you know best how your families run. You know best how your culture is, and you turn back to your backgrounds. But generally speaking, across the board, from an Islamic point of view, the advice we could give, let us accept that what we've said. If there's anything wrong, then we ask for forgiveness as well. وما توفيقي إلا بالله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.